Good morning. Councilmember Mitchell Englander, and this is the Public Safety Committee meeting of Monday, July 11th, 2011, in room 1010. It's approximately 9:45. I'm joined by Councilmember Reyes, Councilmember Zine, and Councilmember Cardenas. First, we're going to open up public comment. Do we have any speaker cards?
No, sir.
Okay. And then looking at consent calendar, I'd like to recommend that we move items 1, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 on the consent calendar.
One more time?
One more time, yeah.
Go slower.
1, 5, 9, item 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16.
Second.
I got a second from Councilman Cardenas.
I have a question on one whole second.
On which item, sir?
The question on 12. Just want to hold 12.
Move all the items consent except for 12.
Except for 12. Okay, all items moved.
Second?
All approved. Okay. Okay. First item then is item number 2.
Item 2. Good morning, John White, City Clerk. Motion Zine Perry instructing the Fire Department to report relative to the Department's recruiting efforts, including the need for its participation at job fairs, to what extent these recruitment activities are being done on a regular basis, and the associated expenses and staff time.
Okay, and I understand we've got a presenter from LAFD on that.
Good morning, council members. Trevor Richmond, LAFD Planning Section Commander. As you're probably aware, the competitive nature of hiring in the fire department. A lot of our candidates spend many years training and getting education, additional certifications before they even enter the hiring process in the fire department. One of the things that we've tried to do in the fire department, realizing that, is to get out into those communities and those underrepresented areas and educate those people on what it takes to be competitive in the hiring process in the fire department. We feel that the recruitment process in the fire department is extremely important. We'd like to move forward with it. And in light of the recent implementation of the deployment plan, we anticipate that we'll be hiring in approximately a year and a half. And the lead time that we need to get qualified candidates just from the personnel department side is about 14 months. So to target those areas in the neighborhoods that are underrepresented in the fire department and make those candidates competitive is a very important thing to the fire department.
And what's the cost estimate on it right now?
Good morning, Captain Kristen Crowley. I head up the recruitment unit. According to our records through city personnel, we have spent in 2010 to 2011 $18,666 for the paid events that we've gone to. We also go to free events as well.
Okay, and then since this was Councilman Zine's motion, did you have any questions on this as well?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The information I received from previous chief was that they weren't going to hire for around 3 years, that they were going to do the 318 attrition for the next 3 years. And if that's the case, what troubles me is to give people false expectations that we're going to hire them, and they prepare and they anticipate. And I'm all for hiring, but if we're cutting back 318 on attrition, we need to be honest with those applicants and let them know 3 years down the road is a long time to wait. You mentioned $18,000. What's the personnel cost and the number of personnel involved?
The personnel, as for the costs, Chief Richmond probably follow that, but who's assigned to the recruitment units? Myself, one captain, and one firefighter. We
You
have
got two folks assigned?
Yes, sir.
So that's it?
That's it.
Okay. So
Originally was 6 when we were hiring, and then we're now down to the minimal staffing, which is one fire captain and one firefighter.
And you actually go out and do the recruitment along with the...
Yes, sir.
Okay. So obviously that is a reasonable number of personnel. But what about giving these folks false expectations that, especially if people come out of the military, they want to join the fire department, they want to join the police department, and I know the competitive process is there, but there are few, if none, opportunities when you have 318 attrition. How do we balance that?
Well, and you bring up a good point, council member. I think when we originally looked at how long it would take to absorb those extra people, we anticipated, but we weren't sure. There are some people that left early, left the drop early, and we anticipated that we would get some, and I think we got a little bit more than we thought. So our window has actually shortened a little bit. And when you take that into account, the process and getting those people through the hiring process that could take as long as 14 months, and then getting out in those communities and educating those underrepresented and what they need to do to be competitive in that process. You know better than anyone, council member, how competitive the hiring process is in the fire department.
Right.
A lot of these members come into the position already being a paramedic, already being an EMT. They might have bachelor's degrees in fire science. So to get those underrepresented people, we need to educate them on what they need to do to make themselves competitive, and that's a long process.
Okay. So you're looking at a year and a half instead of 3
Well,
years.
it's hard to say. I don't have the exact number on when we'll actually get the complete absorption, but I've been told it could be as short as a year and a half.
Because I understand there's 318 that are supposed to trit.
Yeah, 318 minus the existing vacancies that we currently had, I think
Right.
was 56.
Okay.
So when you take the 318 minus the 56, that was the actual number that we had to absorb.
Okay. So
And
there
then-
will be the opportunity then. Obviously, we're going to hire down the road. I know when you put the notice out, you have thousands of people that show up for a test.
Right.
If you're going to hire 100, you get 5,000 people show up for that. So the aspect is we're not giving them false expectations. We're giving them something realistic, but we tell them we're not going to hire for the next few months or next couple of years.
And-
I mean, in other words, I want to be honest with those folks, because I've been contacted by people coming out of the military saying they want to join the LA City Fire Department. You know, what are their opportunities right now? They say they're pretty bleak. What you need to do is continue going to school, use the government finance for that, and then hopefully down the road they'll start opening up hiring again.
And sir, just so you understand also, the message that we in the recruitment unit give to everybody that we do speak to, this is a long-term process. These are the things that you need to do to make yourself competitive, and that may take up to a year and a half to 2 years to do that. So in this lull, this is the message that we're giving them, is prepare yourself. We also show them the expectations as a physical aspect of the job with this practice CPAT and a number of other prep. As for the military, we are recruiting them heavily as well. They come out, they want a job right now.
Right.
But as for the information that we share and disseminate to everybody, it's the real hard facts of this is when we're anticipating hiring, this is what you need to do from A to Z.
Okay.
And that's the message that we're sharing.
Okay. So the personnel hopefully will increase for recruitment when you get back online.
Yes, sir, we're hoping, yes.
Start hiring again. Okay, that resolves the issues that I had. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Reyes.
Thank you. We have technology, we have websites, we have internet. Do you have reference points for youngsters, folks who are in junior college, folks who are looking at the fire department so they can be ready within the months, that window that exists? Can you share a little bit of that?
Specifically, Councilmember, you're talking about...
Well, let me take a step back.
Okay.
In your presentation, you referred to community groups and areas that are underrepresented. So for me, a natural link is how you communicate. How do they get information? Where they get information? Now, I know many of the youngsters now have iPods, they have iPhones, they have a whole range of technology. They go to videos. Do we have anything that has destinations that allows youngsters, people from the areas that you are concerned with, to have access to information that allows them to understand what it takes to be a firefighter?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We actually do have a website set up through city personnel. It's joinlafd.org.
What is it?
Joinlafd.org.
Okay.
And that's our primary way, at least via the internet, where we have a number of tabs in there. It's broken down into the hiring process. We have a variety of EMT schools, paramedic schools. There's videos on there. This is our fitness guide. It walks any candidate that's interested or thinking about becoming a firefighter. They can contact us directly. We talk to the schools, but that's our main arena, is via the internet through joinlafd.org. And it also then links over to lafd.org, which also has some information on it.
So I'm assuming the high schools and the junior colleges are aware of this site. When a youngster goes to a counselor or is walking through the administration building and they see career opportunities.
That's actually part of our recruitment efforts, is going around to ensure we have a number of a very nice literature that we pass out to the high schools. We even go down to the middle schools, and remember, there's only 2 of us, so we're spread somewhat thin, but we do get that message out to the counselors, and then that's the best way, at least, to get an overall broad picture of what it entails to be hired by the Los Angeles Fire Department, and that's our main avenue.
You have young interns, you have young individuals who actually are stationed at fire stations.
The cadets, yes.
The cadets. When a youngster sees a cadet in uniform speaking about firefighters, wouldn't that be one of your best way to introduce and convince youngsters, especially if they look alike and they come from the same neighborhoods? Aren't the cadets working with you, and aren't they helping you?
We do have a strong relationship with the cadet posts. They're also linked to that website. It's a direct link from joinlafd.org over to theirs. It tells the younger generation of how to become a cadet through the Los Angeles Fire Department. So we actually do utilize them, and also Crew 3, which is based out of Fire Station 88, and we utilize both of those entities to assist us with recruitment.
When you do report backs, I understand this is a verbal presentation to the committee. Could you cite for us where the cadets are located, in which stations, in which areas?
Yes, sir.
And then perhaps to the council offices, if they choose, connect with you and enhance that network so that we can speak to the counselors and or principals that we work with on a daily basis in our districts to stimulate a different sense of awareness of how to access information to prepare to be a firefighter. That's something I would like to see a report. Is that possible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cardenas.
Does this recruitment have any impact on diversity within the department, as far as diversity of the classes of training classes, and what the diversity is when we do hire?
In regard to a direct relationship, if we go out and recruit an underrepresented individual, what's the follow-up if they do get hired? Is that
Yes.
okay? As for statistically, I'm not sure you have the statistics.
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
As who we actually go out and target, it's a wide array. I mean, we go anywhere the gamut, so we can cover and get that diverse group recruited. Now, the recruitment aspect is obviously different than the hiring. We can get that message out and mentor as many individuals as we possibly can, and then the follow-up is, once they do start our hiring process, assist them through the process. As for statistics, I wouldn't have the statistics of starting from A and then they actually get hired by us. The only thing we could look at is the breakdown of the numbers and what it looks like of the graduating class. And if we recruited them, that's something that we could run statistically, I believe. But we do more of a broad range, really try to capture as many people as we can to inform and educate them.
Is the department looking to have a much more diverse workforce today than it did 10 years ago, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Well, if you're looking to have a much more diverse department of personnel, why wouldn't you already be tracking your recruitment activities and whether or not there's a cause and effect on that diversity?
You know, that's something that we're working on, but as already been stated, we have very limited staff in our recruitment effort right now. We just have 2 people. And, you know, my experience with the recruitment effort goes back to hiring female firefighters as a personal anecdote. And following that process and what we did to bring female firefighters into the Los Angeles Fire Department, which we are an industry leader in. For fire departments across the country of our size, we have a larger percentage of female firefighters than any other fire department in the country.
And what percentage would that be?
I'm not sure the percentage right now. I'm sorry, Councilmember, I don't have that in front of me.
But see, you're actually making my point. You are the department. You are part of recruitment. You just gave me an anecdote about you personally setting out to make sure that you fortify as much as possible the potential for increasing the number of women who get recruited. You can't guarantee that they'll get hired because then that's up to them, right? And yet at the same time, you don't know what the percentage is. I question how committed the department is to making sure that you are open to yourself and to your own department members that it is a commitment, that it is something that's taking place, that it is something that everybody needs to accept. Because that's one of the biggest problems with our fire department in the city of Los Angeles that we should be very proud of, is that we still have some issues within that department where people are not willing to accept the new world. So what can you do with your limited staff to make sure that that stuff rolls off your tongue whenever a council member asks, whenever a potential recruit asks, when somebody who's within the fire department who just might not like the idea of hanging out with women at work all day and living with them, etc. Not that that would be the case in any fire department, but just in case. What can you do to make sure that that atmosphere is what I just described, where everybody accepts the fact that there are more women and you're going to continue to have more qualified women working in the department, living in these firehouses, where people have to just accept that?
I think initial answer to that would have the fire chief's office, the chief of staff, work directly with the recruitment unit to make sure that there are no layers of bureaucracy to get in the way. And that's my initial answer to you, council member. And we can make that happen.
Sure. Somebody just stepped up.
Yeah, I just stepped up. I'm Tina Rodriguez from the Personnel Department. I just want to say that we do collect some data right now, currently, in the notification cards, people who have expressed interest in applying for the next exam. So in the Personnel Department, we collect that information, and we could turn it around and provide it to the Fire Department to see how they're achieving their goals in terms of recruitment. We can also compare what was done in the past. We have data from the past, so we can use that as a benchmark and see how we're doing. And also we can look at statistics, you know, the current census data, to compare it with what is in the labor force now.
Well, thank you. But see, that's one of the things that I think is important. If it truly is a commitment of the department, and then we have somebody from the personnel department saying that some of that information is available, but it doesn't seem as though the two departments are communicating and fortifying each other with that data so that they can actually live up to their own expectations, which is to have a much more diverse department. And one of the things that I'd like to clarify, in case in the back of anybody's mind in personnel or the fire department or any department within the city, when Pete Wilson and then State Attorney General Dan Lundgren were the faces of Proposition 187, thank you, Proposition 187, after it passed, it went through the courts. And in the courts, it was actually Dan Lundgren and Pete Wilson who actually stated that their intent on Proposition 187 had to do with preferential treatment in hiring. And it was they who actually said that they had no problem, and the law does not affect people's ability to go target certain communities when it comes to increasing diversity of the pool of potential hires. I just want to make sure that both of your departments understand that that is a fact of law. And if you don't understand that, please research it and then correct me if I'm wrong. Because that's one of the things that I've run into as a policymaker since 1996, an elected official, that some people, it was lost on them of that fact. They think that they cannot target recruitment for minorities, for women, etc., and they think that they can't target recruitment. But once that person becomes an applicant, then everybody is treated identically. Okay, for example, recruiting in Latino publications, recruiting in newspapers that are primarily in African American communities, etc., those kinds of things. There's absolutely no law against that. As a matter of fact, it's encouraged. And it's even admitted by Dan Lundgren and Pete Wilson, who were the architects of Proposition and the face of 187. They actually admitted in court. That's not what it's about. So recruitment can be targeted. So what I'd like to see, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, that your department report to this committee on a monthly basis on the structure that you have for targeted recruitment for those communities, as you stated, sir, and then also making sure that you have a blueprint and a plan and a commitment that's actually being carried out, not just spiritually, but on paper.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And Mr. Reyes, follow-up questions.
Some of the points that I wanted to follow up have been touched by Councilman Cardenas. From the report, Mr. Chair, if it's possible, if we can see where the recruitment function lies within the organizational structure of the fire department. When you tell me it's one captain and one firefighter in a city that's 3 million with a student population 4 million, the student population that we have, in certain pockets you have 40% dropout rates. So looking for qualified youngsters and or students may not be as easy as we think. But I'd like to see how the department, the leadership and management is looking at recruitment. And one of the telling signs is where it lies in the organizational structure of the fire department. So you look at the level of commitment based on the number of resources, but also where you lie in the structure of the command chart. And if you can put that in your report, that will say a lot about the real commitment.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so then if I could, one more? Okay.
Well,
Sure, so
coming back and we,
since they're going to be coming back, they'll be coming back as in a month.
if you could also just have the breakdown, I think you probably have the breakdown, male, female, the ethnic breakdown, like the police department has. You can also report that back, what you currently have on within the department. Thank you.
Sure.
So then if you could, thank you, if you could report back then in 30 days with the statistical breakdown, ethnicities, genders, all the information, not only for, again, current staff, but also recruitment and the strategic plan and your outreach 30 days from now, that would be great.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then in the meantime, we can receive and note and file that item.
Honorable Chair, point of clarification for Councilman Zine. He had mentioned that the 14-month, I just want to make sure, Councilman, you understood, that wasn't the point that we would be done with absorbing all the vacancies. That's the point that we need to start the hiring process.
Right. No, I understand.
Okay, you understood that. I just want to make sure. Yes, sir. Okay.
Okay, great, thank you. Next item.
Item 3, City Attorney Report and Ordinance relative to prohibiting the purchase of animals on public streets or sidewalks in the City of Los Angeles.
Okay, and we have some speaker cards on that as well as some presenters. We'll take the presenters first, if we could. City Attorney and Animal Services.
Good morning, council members. My name is Kathy Davis. I'm an Assistant General Manager with the Department of Animal Services. As you're probably aware, we have an ordinance currently on the books that prohibits the sale of live animals on streets and on sidewalks. The proposal before you is to modify that slightly and also include, to close the loophole, the purchase of live animals on the streets and on sidewalks. As I'm sure you're aware, we have a large problem with these kinds of activities happening in areas such as Santee Alley. And many times the animals that are purchased there wind up in our shelters, which obviously increases our workload. And unfortunately, many times the animals are in substandard conditions when they come in, or they're being sold on the street in very substandard conditions. They're either sick, on the verge of death, or are out in very stressful heat intense situations. So we're looking for your approval to obviously try and modify this to close that loop.
Assistant City Attorney Dov Lassell. I drafted the ordinance, and I believe it reflects the wishes of council, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, and just looking through this, how does this affect current adoption programs, street adoption programs? We've got a lot of organizations out there that actually will host special events and have sidewalk adoptions in front of pet stores and other places throughout the city. How does this, or pet supply places, I should say, how does this affect that? And then also, what type of enforcement program are we going to have for this?
The enforcement program will be based on an administrative citation ordinance that is making its way through the City Council at present. And that will be the fees of $250 for a first violation, etc. This should have no effect on the street adoptions that have been going on for years. That since we have an existing ordinance that prohibits the sale of animals, and this has never been interpreted to prevent adoptions by nonprofits.
So if it's an administrative citation, who will be giving the citation, and then who will be receiving the citation? Will it be at the store, the individuals, all the individuals, the folks that are actually purchasing the animals, all the above?
I'm sorry. The ordinance would allow us to issue a citation to both the seller as well as the purchaser. The further plan that we have for enforcement is also to be able to post signs warning people in areas such as Santee Alley that obviously they cannot purchase animals. The mission is more an educational purpose. Certainly we have the right under the ordinance to then go ahead and issue citations.
Okay, I understand. We've got some questions as well. Mr. Cardenas first.
Thank you. Now, who could legally enforce it within the city, and who is likely to be spearheading the enforcement? Would it be animal services officers? Would it be LAPD? Would it be building and safety?
I believe the ordinance is structured so that we'll be the issuing agent for the tickets. I don't know if that can speak
Animal
to
services, but
Yes,
but
sir.
that's why I asked the question. It's one thing for one particular department to understand that this ordinance will fall on their shoulders primarily, but it's another thing for us to understand who legally is going to have the authority to enforce.
All of them will be able to. We have not limited the language to any one department.
Okay, thank you. And that's good to know. And then also, when it comes to a situation where, like on Santee Alley, where it's chronic, I'll use that as an example. What is the likelihood, or does the ordinance allow the authority enforcing this ordinance to confiscate the animals that are present within that action at the moment?
We already are confiscating them, and most times those animals are underage and in sick conditions, so we can confiscate them.
Okay, but I understand for humane purposes you will confiscate them because they're sick or underage, etc. However, would you be confiscating any, like say Santee, somebody's selling bunny rabbits, and they have a couple adults, and then maybe 10 young ones or what have you. Would you be confiscating all 10 or just the little ones for their safety and health purposes? How do you go about enforcing that when it comes to confiscation?
I'll have to leave that question for Dov. I don't know that we've been down to Santee Alley and ever had a situation where we didn't confiscate them because they were sick or underage.
But so therefore, my question, I guess, is to the city attorney: does the ordinance, or do ordinances like this in general, allow the authority who's actually enforcing it to actually have the discretion when it comes to the items that are being sold illegally? Do they have the right to confiscate them?
This ordinance does not deal with that. It simply deals with making it illegal for purchasing of these animals to
The sale and purchase.
Right. The sale has been around for a long time, so it's been illegal to sell. and the city council felt that it was necessary to put additional teeth into the sale by forbidding the purchase as well. And then in addition, because of this new ordinance making its way through city council, we've also added language in here that it can be enforced not only criminally, but also civilly through the means of this administrative citation ordinance. Beyond that, we haven't opened up the question of can the department confiscate animals. So I think, as Kathy said, if the department now has the ability to confiscate animals because they believe them to be in dire need, they've been neglected, etc., then the department already has that authority. This will not affect that one way or the other.
Okay, so if you could please, I don't know if it's you personally or if somebody from the city attorney's office could educate me or the council in general when this goes forward to let us know, I guess it's the previous ordinance of the sale that is more to my questions about confiscating the actual items that are being sold illegally, in this case, live animals. If we could find out what latitude of authority we have as a city. Obviously, when it comes to animal services, if an animal is sickly or needs us to confiscate it so that we can make sure that it doesn't die, that probably transcends any ordinance, really. But what I want to make sure is that when it comes to the transaction itself, that's where we really hit people who are chronic. They don't want to lose their breeders. They don't want to lose their source of income. So the bottom line is, I think that it's important that we have that teeth and we exercise that as well. But I want to make sure that we have the ability to do so. It's not just sick animals, but any animal in question at the site of sale. Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Mr. Reyes.
Are you familiar with the environment that we are speaking of? Have you been to Santee? Anybody in this room have been to Santee to see this?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe for me what it is that you find?
What you see are vendors that hang around street corners. They have a set-up shopping cart that has a prescribed group of animals. Usually it's some 2 or 3 bunnies, couple containers of turtles, maybe some birds, and they basically stand out at the street corner hawking their wares. And they're also equipped with spotters, with people that are watching for enforcement agents or people undercover that come down and look for them, and they're very quick to leave the minute they get a little bit freaky.
So how many are we talking? What's the volume like? How many sites? How many locations?
Well, the last time that I was down there, there were 5 different vendors that were down there selling them. Many times when we've been down with the LAPD and have been working with them, they can end up confiscating anywhere from 20 to 100 different bunnies.
So the volume is relatively high.
Yes, sir.
So when we talk about enforcement, is the police working with animal services, or how is the coordination? How has that been structured?
We've had our best bus when police department assists us.
Okay. So Santee, you have some relatively challenging conditions for human beings in as much as for animals. So are we forcing the LAPD now to make a decision between the animals and the people, or how's that being structured? I want to just understand the priority.
We aren't down there every single day by any stretch of the imagination. We have limited resources, as does LAPD. We basically choose times and opportunities when we do have some staffing that we can all spare and go down there and take them. LAPD also does some sweeps themselves and will call us or call one of our rescuers when they've made a particular bust. So it's a coordinated effort, and we do the very best that we can. Granted, we'd love to have more response down there. We just don't have the physical staff.
So when we look at the fines, is that a leveraging point to scare people away, given the limited amount of time we have and resources to implement and enforce? Do you feel the fine levels are at a good place? Do we need to increase it? How would you look at the leveraging that we do have as a municipality? Because we do have constraints, and we have to be strategic when we do enforce. Do you think the fines are high enough? I mean, can you give me some feedback on that?
I think one of the reasons that we're pursuing the purchaser now is because the fines on the sellers hasn't been very effective. In most instances, the sellers are teenagers or people that don't have identification. The bail amount hasn't been very high, so there's been strategic problems with pursuing the actual seller on the street, which is somebody that's probably being paid a very small sum and has no idea what it is that they're doing. So I think it's twofold. I think we need to work on getting a better education process for people that are down in areas such as Santee Alley, that this is prohibited, and to stop them from wanting to purchase, because there is a penalty that they could be subjected to if they purchase the animals. So I think taking a different look and reversing who it is that we're pursuing may have a more positive effect on obviously getting the problem to reduce and cease.
And do you think the fine is high enough?
Yes.
Okay.
I think $250 for a first-time purchase of something in Santee Alley is going to really hurt somebody, and I think they'll also spread the word that you shouldn't be doing it down there.
Okay, because I know I have challenges in the impoverished areas of the city with vendors in general, certain issues there, and it is challenging, but I do know we're limited in terms of enforcement. That's why I was asking these questions. So, thank you.
Is that a citation for each individual incident or each individual animal? So if somebody purchases 2 rabbits or 2 turtles?
It would be for the incident rather than for the animal. So if someone is selling, this is also substantially higher than what exists in the municipal code now, and it's consistent with the penalty levels of the new administrative code. And so we've gone from a bail structure that is now maybe $20, $25, $50, up to $250. And as Kathy said, this should make a huge dent on the people selling. Plus, it will also affect people purchasing.
And it says it per incident in the ordinance. The draft ordinance says per incident rather than per individual animal.
It simply references the language in the new administrative ordinance, but generally this would be for an incident.
Mr. Zine?
A couple of questions. The folks that don't have money take community service. Community service means they don't pay the fine. Have we done an analysis to find out how many are doing community service in lieu of paying a fine? Because that seems to be a common theme with community service, working with Caltrans or something such as that, if they end up getting cited. The other question, when we have an LAPD animal task force, has that been utilized to try and address this problem?
The ACTF has also been down to Santee Alley as well in an effort to address the situation.
Okay, and if they don't have any identification, they're not going to get a citation, they're going to get booked, which means they'll go to jail, they'll be processed through that system, which is a time-consuming task. The reserve officers were used, LAPD reserve officers were used with a bandit task force detail, where they had a similar situation where bandit taxi cabs were going throughout the city and picking up fares, putting legitimate cabs basically out of business. And the reserves assisted in that, which was a successful program. What I suggest is you contact that particular division, I think it's Central Division, and see if they could do a task force with the reserves, because they mustered them up throughout the city. And if you do this for a short period of time, you probably have some significant impact, where they understand that it won't be tolerated. And the Reserve Corps, they have hundreds of officers in the Reserve Corps that have peace officer status, with a couple of animal services personnel, a number of reserve officers who can be the purchasers, as they did with the bandit taxi cab program. And you can do a lot with the volunteer service and save a lot of money and get the program resolved. Because it looks like if you do a small impact, they're going to continue doing it because they're going to want to sell those animals. And if you have the big push consistently, they'll probably get the message a lot quicker. And obviously, if the signs don't do any good, and without enforcement, the signs don't have much impact. So it's a serious problem. I think it's gone on way too long. But I would suggest if you can coordinate with the LAPD Reserve Program, officers like to do those kind of details, and I think you might have some major impact in a very quick fashion. And then put an end to it. But the analysis we've done shows that a lot of folks are taking community service in lieu of paying fines. And if they're not paying the fines, they do community service or Caltrans or whatever. And if they don't have ID, there's a whole process that takes place. But I think if you bring in additional resources without laboring the police department, you might have more impact getting this thing resolved.
I think the reserve officers are a great idea.
Thank you.
Since chairperson is a reserve officer.
Since Mr. Zine is also a reserve LAPD officer, it sounds like he wants to go undercover personally to be a bunny buyer. We can probably
get a schedule to him.
Can we get him a costume as well that
Certainly.
people won't recognize him? Okay, and a cape perhaps. And Mr. Cardenas has some questions.
It is a fact that reserve officer, now council member, former officer, now reserve and council member, Zion does have a propensity for boas, so maybe he's going to be looking for snakes. And all joking aside, we do have a big problem not only with domestic animals that they sell illegally, but exotic animals like exotic birds and snakes and things of that nature, which creates a health issue not only for the animals but also for the people who come in contact with them. They just don't understand, some of the health matters and how to care for them to make sure that their kids don't get sick, or the actual people who buy them and try to care for them don't get sick either, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We've got some speaker cards on this item as well. It looks like I'll bring up all four from the Bunny World Foundation. Don Brzezowski, Leila Hazmurazadvik, and correct me if was that close? That's very close. Okay, fantastic. And I'll bring you all up at one time if that's okay. And Sarah Johnson and Adele White. Assuming you're all on the same side of this issue, since you're all from the Bunny World Foundation. I think Zion might be a member of that as well.
Maybe she should come after us. She's filming.
Okay.
All right, so I'm Leila Hajmuratovich. I'm the president and founder of the Bunny World Foundation. I'm very happy to see this item on the agenda after 3 years of our industrious work. We have started June 16th when I got violently attacked in Santee Alley by 30 illegal animal vendors. Media was mobilized and LAPD was informed, and up to this date, nothing has happened to those who have almost got me killed. I've seen animals in horrible conditions. It has touched me. I have put my life on hold, and 1,300 bunnies later, 300 volunteers later, thousands of letters written to John Perry later, and lots of dead bunnies in our arms, in the arms of our foster homes and volunteers. We have spent almost $300,000 to get them to live. We can tell you every day we get a phone call from a disturbed mother who has just spent $1,000 and has a seizuring rabbit in their arms. Maybe rabbits are not meaningful to a lot of people, but they do have souls, and they are extremely loving, and children fall in love with them, and then they die in their arms. They're sold next to turtles, salmonella-infected turtles, and it is a public safety issue. 9-year-olds are selling them. It's a child labor issue. And of course, we have gangs involved in the entire thing that support the vendors, and it is a touchy subject in every possible which way. We have pythons being confiscated by the bid office. We have LAPD doing raids incessantly. We just got 30 bunnies in the last 7 days. I've spent day and night. Last night I was up syringe feeding 30 baby bunnies, and it takes 2 hours of my life. So I would encourage that this ordinance pass. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think there's more that needs to be done, but at least fines will make a difference. So thank you very much for approving it, hopefully.
I just wanted to share a personal experience.
And I'm sorry, if you can just state your name again.
Sure. Don Rosnowski. I live in the city of Los Angeles, and I happened to be in the Santee Alley with my husband recently, and I came across some purchasers of these little rabbits, and I saw a father with 2 children, each child holding a little cage with a little rabbit no bigger than the size of the palm of my hand. It was a hot summer day, and these kids were ecstatic carrying around their little bunnies in their cage, and I stopped and I asked them, where did you find those bunnies? And they told me that there was a vendor about a block down. And I pulled the father aside and I asked him if he knew that these bunnies were being sold illegally. He said he had no idea. And I said, do you realize that these bunnies are not weaned from their mothers? And he said, no. I said, do you realize that when you get home that these bunnies will probably be dead before the weekend's over and your kids are going to feel the impact of that? He had no idea. I walked farther on. I saw another woman, a middle-aged woman with her husband and adult child, and they were sitting at a outdoor eating table, and this little bunny in the cage was in the sun. It was nearly lifeless. It had a carrot and a piece of lettuce in there, which that young, they don't eat that stuff. They need to be on their mother's milk. And again, I asked, where did you get this bunny? And they pointed me down the street. And I asked the woman if she knew how old this bunny was. She says no. And then I asked her if she knew that the sale of these animals was illegal. She said she had no idea. And then I told her that if she wanted this bunny to live, she needed to get it out of the sun. She needed to get it home. She needed to start syringe feeding it milk. She was devastated right there on the spot. She felt so bad. And she felt guilty over it, but she didn't know. She has no idea that these bunnies are too young. She had no idea that they're being sold illegally, and she didn't know that purchasing them is going to be illegal. The adult son looked at his mother. His son was in his 30s and said, I told you, Mom, there's something wrong with this rabbit. This is not right. And she felt terrible. I felt terrible. I just don't like seeing it. I walked on. I found a vendor who had a stack of cages with a bunny in each one, little turtles up on top. And I started taking photographs. And she told me no photographs. And I said, why not? She wouldn't answer me. And she didn't want to, she kept turning away. She didn't want to just talk to me. And I said, well, do you realize what you're doing is illegal? She pulled up the hefty bag over the cages and walked on. Nothing I could do about it. Not even a few seconds later, LAPD comes by. I flagged them down. I stopped them. And I asked them, or I told them asked them if they were aware that there were some vendors right here that just packed up and moved down the street.
We've got to wrap it up.
Okay. And they said, yeah, this has been going on forever. Well, what are you going to do about it? This is illegal. And then they didn't do anything. They gave me a name and number of, contact this division. Moments later, Business Association came down on their bikes. I stopped them, pointed it out in the same words. This has been going on forever, but nobody seems to be doing anything about it. I'd like to see this enforced. This is just flat out inhumane.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Adele White, and I have this is from the Sacramento Bee. It is their pet section. The animal overpopulation, it's not just bunnies, it's dogs, it's cats, it's everything that's out there. But what they put in their paper every day is the State Board of Equalization requires that a person who sells pets must register with the board for a seller's permit if they are engaged in business in California and make more than 2 sales during a 12-month period. The number of sales is measured by each individual sale of an animal and not by the number of litters. Is there some way we could use this?
Okay. No,
You can submit that for the record with your request.
You can, yes, you can. I mean, we have something on the books. It's a pet. It just says a pet. A pet could be anything.
if you can hand this to the sergeant as well, we'll put it in part of the record. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Oh, and maybe we could stop the posting of these kinds of signs.
And you can submit that as well if you'd like.
You can pass that around.
Sure.
Great.
Well, I was going to take it to animal control, but here, let me take it.
Yeah, we'll give it back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just pass it around and
Thank
give it
you.
back. Yes. Okay. Okay, was that it?
That was it.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
I'm Sarah Johnson. I recently joined the Bunny World Foundation, and I'm the editor of, or an editor on the film. A film is being made about this. And I've seen a lot of the footage of sick and dying bunnies. I've seen really upset children. And I guess I don't understand, since the footage reaches all the way back to 2008, why nothing substantial has been done, why there aren't any signs, or why the laws haven't been toughened. And it affects the bunnies and the kids every day.
Well, one other thing, Mr. Chairman, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your efforts, and thousands of hours of volunteers just go into your one organization, but it's really important that you continue to make sure that policymakers at the local level, especially at the state level, continue to try to put the pressure on themselves to make sure that we not only pass laws and ordinances, but that we enforce them as well. It's really important to understand that, over 500,000 admitted domestic animals are euthanized every year in California. And again, that's the admitted number. And, there's different categories where they don't count certain animals in those numbers. So the bottom line is, it is a big, big problem. And if you don't want to look at it, if people don't want to see it from the compassionate vantage point, you're talking about tens and tens of millions of dollars are spent of taxpayer dollars every year in California alone, just on the process of trying to care for animals for a few days or what have you, that eventually they get euthanized. So the bottom line is, there's a lot of reasons why. Number one, for just the sake of just doing the right thing, we should. But at the same time, there's a lot of reasons why or a lot of ways in which we can get the general public's attention to make sure that they pressure us to keep the pressure on the people who are actively involved in this illegal activity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to move that item on to council.
Second.
With approval?
All in favor? All right.
Very good. Excellent.
And the next item.
Next item is item 4, communication from the mayor and CA report relative to a fiscal year 2010 Urban Area Security Initiative Grant Award from the California Emergency Management Agency.
Good morning, Maria Ramos, Office of the CAO. The Mayor's Office is requesting the acceptance of the fiscal year 2010 UWASI grant for a total of $55.9 million. It's to be divided among the city and 27 LA Long Beach urban area partner jurisdictions. There are 4 major Homeland Security focus areas that are approved in the UWASI budget, and these include the strengthening of interoperable and survivable communications capabilities, the strengthening of information sharing collaboration capabilities in law enforcement investigations, protection of critical infrastructure and key resources, and catastrophic incident planning, response, and recovery. The city's total UWASI allocation is $19.9 million. This is going to be divided among 6 city departments for various UWASI projects. And there are no matching funds required for this grant.
I'm sorry, what's the city's portion?
$19.9 million.
So that's $19.9 million divided over 3 years, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And any additional communication from the mayor's office on this as well?
No, my name is Elisa Benson. I'm the grants director in the Office of Homeland Security and Public Safety. I'm just here to answer any questions that you have on the UWASI grant.
Okay, colleagues, any questions on this?
The only question that seems to always come up with these UWASI grants is the administrative expense out of the mayor's office, $200,000, $100,000 for supplies and equipment, $100,000 for travel. We've had UWASI grants for a long period of time, and since the grants come to us and then dispersed to other agencies in this region, why do the supplies and equipment continue to, just in case, travel $100,000 and $100,000 supplies and equipment? We've already got the people in place. So can you explain that $200,000 for administrative expenses?
I'm Charles DeCure. I'm the financial director. The $100,000 is with the equipment and supplies. It's the regular office equipment, the admin stuff, computers.
We already have those stuff. We purchased them. We don't.
Well, some of it, the supply stuff, is stuff we run through. The paper, everything else we use. But we have created a new monitoring group because of past audits. Knowing that we need to beef up our monitoring group, they're out in the field. It involves a little travel, not much, but there are computers.
Where are they going for $100,000? That's a lot of travel.
Usually we won't spend that much. Originally, when we put the budget together, we have in the past spent that much. But if it isn't spent near the end of the grant, we can reprogram that, either put it back into the program or use it for the personnel costs.
I have a continuing problem with the administrative costs on these grants. It seems to be a continuing saga where we get the grant, we buy equipment, we do this, we do that, and then every grant, it seems like we just tack on more and more and more. And how many folks assigned to this particular UWASA project?
We have a total staff of 20, accountants, contract folks, grant specialists. The requirements of the grant have increased, the compliance requirements. They've really pushed us to do more monitoring, review of procurement. We do have up to 29 subrecipients for this UWASA grant, and we administer it for the county and the city. So the requirements are huge, and it does take a huge staff. And we actually have less folks than we need, but it does take a lot of folks to get this done.
Isn't the travel all local?
The travel's not all local. There are some conferences and trainings involved.
Yeah, I don't have the details in front of me, but we have every year there's a national UWASI conference that was just held actually a few weeks ago. It brings together, there are 64 urban areas throughout the country, so it brings together all the representatives, both the grants administrator staff and the subject matter experts. This past conference had about 1,700 attendees, so we try to send some of our staff every year to learn the latest trends in grant management, and also FEMA, who administers the grant, is present at the conference, so they update us constantly on different grant ordinances, different grant guidance.
Are any of those expenses by the public safety agencies, or is this just the expenses within the mayor's office?
No, we send a lot of our partners, I think up to 20 folks, first responders who take part in the training, actually provide some training, and some bring back the knowledge to the city and county.
This 100,000 would not only be from the mayor's office, but for others?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. They just be conscious of that, because Mr. Smith was here as the chair. That came up many times about the administrative costs for these grants, and 200,000 is a lot of money. I know it's a $55 million grant, but 200,000 is still a lot of money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cardenas?
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question. Also, I'd like to point out for the record, $100,000 across 3 years.
Yes.
So it's an average of about $33,000 a year for supplies and equipment, about $33,000 a year for travel expenditures, and that's just the upfront breakdown. And as you mentioned, all of these get reconciled and / audited, because that's what not only should we require that of ourselves, but the federal government requires that of every grant that they give us, correct?
Yes.
Especially when it's a grant of $55 million, and our net share of that is about 17 million. So, but I have a question. Is the Comptroller's Office of the City of Los Angeles in any way involved in making sure that that office is aware of or allowed to audit these grants and the expenditure of these funds?
We actually take part in the single audit. It's a requirement anytime you spend over $500,000 in federal assistance. That's a comprehensive look into the last fiscal year, all the activity related to that grant. It's reviewed by an outside CPA firm and by the Comptroller's Office, and it's done annually.
Now, does the Comptroller's Office get reimbursed for the efforts that they incurred in that oversight?
No.
They don't?
No.
Does the Mayor's Office get reimbursed or compensated, or certain monies get reserved for all the men and women hours that they put into this effort?
Well, our staff, we actually prepare the single audit. We're the ones that put it together. We review it through the help of the Comptroller's Office. We submit that to the CPA firm, and it's submitted to the grantor, to the state, and then to the feds.
Yeah, but it's my understanding that whenever we get grants, and rightfully so, since they're going to be administered primarily through the mayor's office and then via the mayor's office to the departments, et cetera, that administrative costs are covered by those grants, including compensating the mayor's budget so that those people hours are covered appropriately so by the grant.
Well,
does that take place?
The hours that we spend preparing the single audit, yes, those are reimbursed.
Okay.
The controller's piece and the CPA firm is not reimbursed by the grant. It's a comprehensive citywide single audit, so all the departments that administer grants take part in this. That is something that could potentially happen as far as reimbursing for some of those costs.
Well, one of the things that I think it's unfortunate is that some people are missing out on their appropriate compensation for their participation. It appears that it's custom and practice that, and again, appropriately so, grants, the way the charter reads, are administered through the mayor's office. They are sought after through the mayor's office primarily. They are administered primarily by the mayor's office. The details are handled by the various departments appropriately so. But at the same time, I think it's important that the controller and anybody else who's involved in grants, that they make sure that they get what is legally and appropriately allotted to them for their participation. Because when they don't, then that takes away from other responsibilities from any department or any entity within the city. And if the federal government, in this particular case with federal grants, if they are certainly aware and afford a local entity like a city of Los Angeles to do so, then we need to exercise that. So I don't know if the controller's office would have to do that directly to start inquiring as to how do they delineate and get compensated or reimbursed for their efforts, or if the mayor's office is going to spearhead that or what have you. I'll leave it up to both of you. They're both elected offices, led by elected officials. I think it's up to them for them to determine how they come to terms with that. It's not my job.
Okay, Mr. Zine?
It does state, page 3, that Grant Management Administration, $2,461,040. Grant Management Administration, that may be part of that to recoup $2,461,000.
Maybe, but we should.
Well, somehow there's the Grant Management Administration as part of the 55. Somehow there's $2 million. How they delineate, you may want to look into that. The 55 plus million. $2,461,000 goes for grant management and administration, and that's probably
That's hundreds of thousands to us.
it is hundreds of thousands. Anyway, it seems to be.
Yeah, it's in the report, yes.
Do a letter to the controller's office, find out if they're doing.
All right, so I'd like to move the item.
For their
There's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item, please.
Before moving on to item 6, point of clarification on number 5. Before you have a CAO report that was submitted after the release of the agenda, and did you want to approve the CAO report for number 5?
Approve CAO report number 5. Is there a second?
Thank you.
Second. Okay. All those in favor?
All in favor, yeah.
Okay.
Next item is item 6. Board of Police Commissioners report relative to a legislative proposal to change the title of reserve police officers from specialist reserve officers to specialist volunteers, and the elimination of the $15 deployment period stipend.
Gloria Gruby, Commanding Officer, Personnel Group with the Police Department.
Joe Mariani, Captain, Commanding Officer, Recruitment and Employment Division. Good morning.
Morning. If you can give us an overview on this ordinance as well, that'd be great.
Yep, this has to do with looking at our specialist reserve officers and changing that to specialist volunteers. One of Chief Beck's focuses when he became chief and we did this reorganization was to take a good look at our reserve program. Hopefully we're growing it and really making use of you, Mr. England or Mr. Zine, in this program now. That being said, it's been very clearly determined that our specialist reserve officers have no nexus to being a sworn or a peace officer. There's no nexus to the sworn or reserve peace officer status, and we presented this request to change the legislation on that.
Okay. And currently, how much do we pay our reserve volunteers, if you will, our specialists that don't have peace officer status?
$15 per month.
$15 a month. So the total budget, how many do we have total?
Last count was just over 400.
About 400?
About 400.
400.
So it's costing $80,000 to $100,000 a year, approximately?
Approximately $80,000.
$80,000 a year. And do you think that this would then deter those volunteers with the name change as a volunteer instead of a specialist, and also the $15? Would that deter them from joining and becoming volunteers or staying as volunteers?
We hope not. And we also have a second group of volunteers already. That's almost 700 volunteers that don't have the specialist title. The specialists are specialists because they may have a special skill such as forensic accounting, a unique language ability, a specific technical or IT skill. That was the intent of it. We believe that people will continue to be altruistic and will still do this for us. The $15 is not really, we believe, an incentive to do this.
Not the reason why they're
Not the
here.
reason
I want to
why
make
they're
sure that we're not penny wise and pound foolish as well, but yes, certainly I would believe it's not the reason we're here. And the question also, though, is do they have different identification cards now that say reserve officer? And are they similar to a full-time officer and a level 1, 2, or 3 officer's identification card?
It's unique, but the title is specifically stated on there. Specialist Reserve Officer. It has a city seal and reference nexus to city service. The problem has also been is that we've had a couple of incidents where they have been mistaken as being full-time officers, and that's led to some administrative and disciplinary matters.
When you say full-time, okay, or
reserve
sworn.
officer, yes.
Right.
Sworn.
Right.
Okay, just sworn, okay. And, yeah, do they have badges? I don't believe them.
They do not have badges.
No badges. And they're not armed, I'm assuming.
Correct.
So this would affect them immediately. And what would be the cost, though, to change over? I didn't see that in the report. Obviously, there's going to be a cost. There's a cost savings, as you'd mentioned, about $80,000 a year. But there will also be a cost to switch over all the IDs, the logistics involved in contacting all of them as well. And collecting, I'm assuming we would be then collecting the former identification cards?
We do not, I'm sorry, we do not have the cost. We would have to switch over the badges. We also believe, though, that some of these are on inactive status now anyways, and as we clean this up and start the switchover, we believe that some of them would probably not continue in the program. They're not even active, some of these as specialist reserves.
And then we'd also, I believe we'd have to amend some sections of the code as well and ask the city attorney to amend sections 22.2227 and 22.230. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Cardenas.
Have we estimated how much this is going to save us in administrative costs? To process $15, I'm sad to say, might cost more to process that $15 than it is to actually give somebody.
It does, and we don't have the breakdown, but there's 3 entities involved in this. It's the commanding officer where the special reserve officer is assigned. That gets coordinated through Captain Mariani's shop, and then they have to contact Fiscal Operations Division. The postage, the administrative costs, I can tell you right now, it's not worth the $15.
Okay. If there's no other questions, then I'd like to instruct the city attorney to draft the ordinance.
Quickly?
Quickly, yes.
Now, it requires an ordinance for us to stop the stipend?
Yes, right now.
In other words, we're going to continue to stipend until we're done with this legislative process?
Correct.
It's we'd have to amend it.
And put a stay on it in the meantime? I mean, these are not hirees. We're not violating their employment rights and stuff.
That would be a question.
As I understand, they don't get paid by the month. They get paid twice a year.
It's about 3 times a year now.
3 times a year. So we're not sending out $50 checks once a month.
No.
So we could say, if this was done within a month, when is the next check due?
I believe it's September.
September. So that could be their final check with the notice at that time, and that could then solve the problem.
Yes. Well, the question, though, also, is there an outreach plan to contact the volunteers and thank them for their service and let them know of the change? Is that part of?
There is, and they also have access. They do have access to the reserve officer website. We also have our intranet, and we would also be contacting all the commanding officers to pass the word on.
Right. But I guess my question, though, is I think a lot of the specialists may feel that they're not appreciated in the department. And I will say that they bring a tremendous resource. We probably save millions of dollars a year, that it's even difficult to calculate to have their expertise and their volunteers come in and work all different types of special areas throughout the department. So the question is there an additional outreach plan where we're going to contact them individually, either by a letter from the department or from the chief thanking them for their service, asking them to continue in their service, how much value they bring to the taxpayers and the residents in the city of Los Angeles and the department?
We are looking at that, and we can do that, and as I believe it was Mr. Stein suggested, we can include that correspondence in the last check as it goes out to them.
And let them know why.
Yes, but we also do invite them and include them in all our other reserve volunteer activities, the recognition days, the appreciation ceremonies, all of those things.
Reserve banquet once a year.
That's right.
That's true.
It's a big banquet.
All right, so again, I'd like to move to instruct the city attorney then to draft the ordinance based on that, with the idea that we'll send appreciation letters and thank you letters to them and letting them know of the change as well. Okay, so moved?
Thank you.
All approved. The next item.
Item 7, see a report relative to the construction of a new Northeast Police Station Administration Building at 3353 San Fernando Road using $28.45 million in Proposition Q General Obligation Bond Funds.
Good morning. I'm Ramon Soto with the City Administrative Officer, and with me is Tom Brennan, who's the head of LAPD facilities. Before you is a request to build a new replacement station for the Northeast area to be funded primarily through the Proposition Q GO Bond program. The program is a $600 million program that was approved by the voters in 2002 to build and renovate public safety facilities throughout the city. The cost would be $29.45 million, financed with $28.45 million in Prop Q funds, $500,000 in 2011-12 police forfeited assets monies. The balance, I guess I would need a technical correction to our report at this point. Our report currently indicates that the $500,000 balance would be financed in 2012-13 and 13-14 with police forfeited assets. Technically, legally, we can't make that commitment, though we expect to have that money. So we do not find it problematic because we have about $5 million in program contingency still. We're going to have about $2 million in further accrued interest, and we expect to have about $1 million in savings from the police SID Tech Lab project. To go on, all 11 of the originally authorized projects have been completed, and in 2009 the council authorized 4 new projects using savings and accrued interest. The 4 new projects were 2 at the police academy. They're in the pre-design stage. The renovation of the old Rampart station. We had built a new Rampart station for regular LAPD operations. The old Rampart station is now under renovation in order to make room for the Metro division. And the 4th project was authorized was in fact a $7.5 million renovation project for Northeast. The scope of the renovations at Northeast was to include HVAC, electrical, fire life safety, and security system upgrades, as well as office and lobby space remodeling. The project was put on hold at the request of the police department by the Prop Q Administrative Oversight Committee about 18 months ago because the police department was very interested in replacing the station because of its conditions. The existing Northeast station was originally a photo film processing facility and is not designed for police station operations. LAPD indicates that the 41,000 square foot building floor plan is not efficient for police. And over the years, staff of the facility have complained of conditions such as unpleasant odors, some of the walls seep chemicals, even though the city has done studies that have found trace materials, but not at levels considered harmful by EPA standards. Police stations that are constructed through the Prop Q program typically include an administration building, a vehicle maintenance facility, and a parking structure. The current request would replace only the administration building. Given that to replace everything would be $48 to $49 million. The police department indicates that they would defer construction of those latter elements until such time that funding would be available. The new station would be about 45,000 square feet and would be modeled on the new Olympic Station floor plan. That would complete my presentation, and we're available for questions.
Great, thank you. First, to start off, just right off the bat, this really seems like it cuts a little close, and also $30 million or $28 million left over from Prop Q. Seems like a lot when during the process we had learned that there weren't funds to finish all the old stations repairs and upgrades that needed to be done. Have those, in fact, been done? Has there been a full inventory and assessment of all the old or current stations to ensure that all those upgrades were complete? Is my first question. And then also, in regards to change orders, did we account for that in this budget as well? Is there what's the percentage on the RFP on this, or for change orders based on that cost estimate to build?
Well, all projects include contingency of their own of about 10%. So this $29.45 million budget would contain a contingency of roughly $3 million. Joining me is Alan Kawaguchi, who's the program manager for the Bureau of Engineering. But all of the program as a whole has a program contingency, as indicated, and currently it's $5 million. Each project has its own contingency of about 10%. So we haven't had an issue with change orders at projects exceeding our budgets to date, to my knowledge. I'm sorry, and you had a first question that...
My first question was, has there been an assessment of all the current stations for upgrades and repair that were under Prop Q to ensure that all of those, in fact, have been completed?
Yes. Those were all part of the Phase 1 of Prop Q, and they have all been completed.
Okay, and then I know that, and then the operational cost, though, has that been calculated on the cost for operational costs for maintenance, et cetera, on a new facility, and is that in the budget?
We initially actually expect maintenance costs to be lower than they are currently because the new building would be 45,000 square feet. The old building is 41,000 square feet, but it's an extremely decrepit building. And so we have to put in, our general services has to put in a lot of resources to keep it running. HVAC, for example, I mean, we recently held a Citizens Oversight Committee meeting there because the members of the Citizens Oversight Committee for Prop Q wanted to see conditions for themselves. And as we were being taken around by LAPD staff, the captain in charge there, showed just how bad the conditions were. I mean, you'd go through some parts where you have like a cold zone, other parts are hot zone, nothing that was particularly sufficient on an ambient basis.
Okay, and I know Mr. Reyes has some questions on this as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, one, just for the record, the site itself is situated in District 13, but it serves the Northeast, which includes my district, Councilor Labange, and Councilor Garcetti, and Councilor Huizar. So it covers the Northeast area of Los Angeles. But this is this building has been broken down, and it's been in repairs forever. We've already cited some of the issues. But there were some rumors and assertions that the Kmart site on Fletcher and San Fernando was to be the destination for the new station, and there was discussion to that effect. I'm assuming since we're making this move, there was no traction on that site, and that we decided to stay in that building. And did the Oversight Committee discuss, is this the most strategic place to have a new station?
Your point that you're making about a potential other site is the first time I've heard it. Maybe Tom Brennan might be able to discuss this more fully from a police department perspective, whether they've had such discussions. But at this point, the police department's official position is that they would like to have the replacement of the station on site. If we wanted to acquire another site, it's a fairly large site. I mean, the cost of it would just skyrocket. Because we're probably talking, Alan, about 2-3 acres or more.
You require about approximately a 5-acre site.
And if you look at the old Kmart site, it's a pretty big site. I just assumed then that the deal wasn't there for the amount of money that we had.
We engaged, part of the reason that we kept putting off the renovations of the Northeast was looking at the potential of getting that site at Kmart. It is something that we discussed with Councilman Garcetti's office, Councilman Labange's office, Councilman Huizar's office. I know, Councilman, you and I had some conversations several years ago about a different location for the site.
Right.
The problem is there is absolutely no funding to purchase that site, and there is currently a lease on the site. They're not interested in coming out of the lease at this point. So for the police department's perspective, looking at other areas in Northeast, there really is no other site that, with our current makeup of the division, which includes areas on the west side of the Los Angeles River.
Right.
We're looking at how, it all comes down to how to get across the river.
Right.
And that site there provides us with several routes to get across the river to serve the jurisdiction on the west side, as well as provide the services on the east side.
So we will be tearing down that building then. That is the consensus.
That's correct.
Have we checked for ground contamination? Did we go through all the secret processes for that?
Alan, I think it would be part of the construction process.
That's
for the
correct.
station.
We would have, but we also demolished a building adjacent to the building, and we did clean it. There's very little contamination that was found there, so we assume the same amount of contamination, if any, under the same building, but there is budget included in here for cleanup.
In case you find something in the ground?
Correct.
Great. Okay. And it's going to be modeled after the Olympic Station?
Yes.
Will they be of same size?
Yeah, it would have a 45,000 square foot footprint.
Interesting. Okay. Well, appreciate your hard work, and it's a long time coming, so thanks a lot.
Do you have another?
Yeah, just if you could report back to my office on the status of the renovations of Foothill Division.
We will do that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilman Zion?
I'm familiar with that site, and I'm familiar with the folks that have been stricken with cancer, including some personnel that died. And there was always this concern about the chemicals.
Yeah.
You mentioned that EPA standards, very little contamination. To me, very little contamination when people stricken with cancer, and I clearly recall Nancy Dyer, who was a detective at that station who passed away as a result of cancer. There's always been that suspect of contamination at that site, and it's been stated by Mr. Soto, some of the walls still ooze. There's a serious problem that's been going on for a long time. The league has spent a lot of money. I'm sure the city spent a lot of money doing analysis, and there appears to be, while there may be little contamination, contamination is contamination. And that's one of the problems. It was a photo processing facility for a long, long time. The air ventilation system has been concerned. I don't know if you've ever done an evaluation, Tom, when you were with personnel, how many folks from that division have been stricken with cancer and associated illnesses compared to other divisions. I got some real concerns about that, and if there is contamination and we still have personnel working out of there, and we're going to then remove them, where are they going to go when it's torn down? What's the plan?
The current plan right now is that we will build the new site, or the new building, next to the existing facility, and once the building is complete, we will move everybody from the existing facility into the new building, and then tear down the old building and clean the site.
And what do you do with the old site?
The old site will become encompassed as part of the new site.
Will it be will it be structured on there, or will it be a parking lot?
It'll be parking lot, it'll be courtyard.
Okay. So there still comes that issue about contamination, and how that affects the people there. Have we done a recent analysis to see if anyone else has been stricken with cancer or associated illnesses at Northeast?
I haven't been in personnel for a little over 5 now years, sir, but there have been no additional cases that have been brought to my attention. We've done some additional research, and I can certainly go back to personnel and have them look at it as well.
Because I remember that whole situation where money was poured in to do evaluation and chemical, but if you say little contamination, it's just like, you're a little sick. Well, a little sick then turns out to be big sick, and then big sick turns out to be more disastrous. So I got some real concerns about that part. And is there going to be a jail assigned to this facility, or is it going to be without jail?
There will not be a jail, but there will be a holding facility similar to what we have at Topanga, similar to what we have at Olympic.
Okay. Well, the big concern I have is that continuing problem with contamination. And the quote was, very little contamination. Very little contamination tells me there's still contamination. And were you here when that was brought up a number of years ago, sir?
No, I was not.
Okay, well, there was a lot of investigations by a lot of folks, a lot of money spent by a lot of league members as well as the general services. And what I'm hearing is there's still contamination there.
I think the way the reports have been written is it's below the EPA levels. There's still ambient levels there.
I understand EPA levels, but the fact is we're putting city employees in a facility which EPA standard, and if you have EPA standard, I sometimes question what their standards are, because they're not living in that building, they're not staying in that building. But I do know clearly that personnel that worked there died, and as a result, dating back to the contamination, which I'm hearing is still there. So I think, Mr. Chair, we need to make the league, has the league been consulted about this?
No.
I think we need to bring the league involved, since they represent the officers, and I think we need to make sure that what we're doing is not going to cause more harm to the folks that are there.
Well, that would not be the case. We're actually replacing the facility. And you're gonna have a brand new facility. The facility
next door.
The facility that has the perceived problems, perhaps, or real problems. It's not clear. Will no longer be there. It's going to be demolished and gone.
But wasn't the place next door also contaminated?
Trace elements of contaminants were found and they were cleaned. And so the same thing would happen here. What if BOE would be doing some, let's say after the building is demolished, then you do core samples of the soils. If anything is identified there, then it's cleaned up.
Are you proposing phase 1 and phase 2?
No, this is all part of the same project. Because this whole project involves the construction of a new police station, and at the same time you have to demolish the old station, and you're not going to leave a hole in the ground.
Can we do this, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely, please.
Could we do this? Could you give us a description of what was found when it was first discovered, and give us a map of where it was found, and then give us a report on how it was remediated? I think it's important that the personnel that moves into the new building feels confident that we have none of the contamination and or concerns raised by Councilmember Zine. The way to do that is to document and show this committee exactly what steps were taken. So when I get asked by the officers, when I see them on the front line in the streets, I have a way to respond in a very informative way. And the way to do that is if you give us a picture of what was found, what was remediated, and the condition once the building is built. I think it takes a lot of pressure knowing off of all of us when you say the contaminated building is going to be raised, that's going to be knocked down, you're going to have a new building on a different site, but we need to know what was the contamination on the site where it will be built.
Correct.
Do you see the picture I'm trying to draw?
I do. We probably wouldn't see that part of it until we actually demolish the building and do an analysis at that point of the conditions on the ground there.
Right. So let me take a step back. If you can give us a staged approach of how you inform this committee, give us in a summary form, not a 2 feet stack of documents. I'm asking for a summary that tells us what was found, how it's to be remediated, and then next steps. So that way we have a way of answering these questions, and it might address some of the concerns, and it's up to the chair of this committee to see how he wants to conduct this. But I would humbly request, Mr. Chair, if we can have that report back to us so we can be able to understand the significant steps taken to remediate this environment.
Right. And I think, just so I can understand you, Council Member, it seems that what you're asking for is a prospective versus retrospective look. Are you asking about the prior building that was demolished?
Right. I'm talking about...
Got you. Thank you.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, so I go through EIRs quite a bit. As Chair Plum, I go through this quite a bit. And so I'm trying to give you a way to respond to this. And one approach would be to get what was discovered. And you do that when you go through your phase 1 and phase 2. You give us an analysis of what was there. And then there is an action taken where you stage the remediation. And that could be another summary. And then how the project is going to be addressing all these concerns at the end. because we need to go through CEQA. You're going to have various agencies reviewing your project. You need quite a few sign-offs. You still have a long way to go. But that will give us a clear picture of where you're going, how are you going to address these issues. You don't want 20 years from now to have an officer say, I have cancer because of the chemicals that were on this site. Because we took the necessary steps to remediate and create a healthy environment. And that is what doesn't exist now in that building based on what's being said on the record in this committee today.
Thank you. And my other concern on that is that you'd mentioned we have some of the dollars allocated and set aside for site mitigation, depending on what's found. That's what you opened up with.
It's not for, it's part of the budget.
It's part of the budget.
For the project.
But if we don't know yet what we're mitigating because Phase 1 and Phase 2 hasn't been yet conducted, then how could we have a budget set aside?
Let's see. The way we can answer it is we demolished a building that was adjacent to it. And like I said, based on the amount of contamination we found in that building is what we're assuming to find in the old northeast facility when we demolition it, that as well as the soil beneath it. So that's the budget that was already created. The building adjacent to it was demolished. We cleaned that area up. We did whatever we needed to. The contamination, like I said, traces amount of elements that were found were very low. So that's what we're assuming that we're going to find in the northeast as well.
So you already have a profile.
Right? Yes.
There's also the history of the coring that's been done within the station that's identified what's beneath it.
Okay, so
one of the reasons that
this is what I'm going to propose then. We go ahead and move and approve the CAO report, however, and send that to the full council. We attach the full environmental document to that report to come to the full council. All the information that Councilman Reyes had suggested that we review, instead of just coming to this committee, I'd like it to come to the full council with the report.
I'd also make a request, Mr. Chair, that the Los Angeles Police Protective League be involved in this, since they were involved in the mitigation at the site and did a lot of evaluation. As has been stated, the walls are still oozing something. So I'd also like to get an evaluation of how many of the personnel from Northeast Division have been stricken with cancer in the last, how long has that place been in business?
Since the early 80s.
Councilor Zine, may I ask you this question?
Yes.
In raising that question and presenting that, are we asserting that there's a cause and effect?
Well, what was proposed at the time was an inordinate number of personnel being stricken with cancer at that particular location.
Well, but what do we achieve? I mean, looking from the bigger picture point of view, what's the message that we're giving here?
Well, I just want to make sure if we're going to build a new station, we're going to build a new station that doesn't have any contaminants, zero contaminants, to expose our city employees to an unhazardous condition.
But if we ask for the number of personnel, are we going to state for the record that this building caused this?
Well, I don't know if we're going to say the building caused it. It just appears that that particular facility had more problems than other facilities.
I would just caution how we
my concern is
how we present this, because this could be used later and retroactively against the city.
Well, I'm sure people who have been stricken with cancer there have already
if I could
gone through that process. But I think if we get the league involved, we can maybe resolve that particular part of it.
On another item, okay, so I'd like, again, to restate, I'd like to approve this item and send it on to council with the one change that the environmental document of any findings and what you've done to mitigate and clean up the site or are proposing in the budget be attached to the file as well. Mr. Zine can certainly notify the league to look into this as well.
I'd request that they notify.
But I wouldn't put that as part of the approval of this item. I'd keep that as a separate item.
I just say request that
they contact them.
Yes.
Okay. So that you do that on your own and contact them and notify them as well, let them inform them. Okay.
I think that if I could on that note, Mr. Zine, I think the best approach would be to have the personnel department, OSHA people report back on that aspect.
Well, let's just have them contact the league and then they can work together to figure out what they want to do.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that it's open, it's honest, it's transparent, and there's no hidden issue. Because what's been stated, there's very little contamination, but there was contamination and there was some serious problems with the personnel, and that's my concern.
So you'll work directly then with the leagues, separate from this body and the council on
We'll ask the
informing
police
them and
department.
notifying them per Mr. Zine's request. Okay. And then so if we, and now Mr. Cardenas has left the meeting, but if we can have a second on that, and all those in favor. Okay, all right, moving on. We still do have a
Councilman
quorum.
we
Yes.
do have a technical correction to the recommendations that was presented by Ramon Soto, so we'd like to give that to the clerk in writing. That would further explain that the forfeited assets trust fund monies that are committed for this year are in fact committed, and that for the balance of the $500,000, we would work with the LAPD to identify those funds.
Okay, we'll make that part of it as well. Thank you all. Next item.
Item 8, CAO and City Controller report relative to SB 165 annual report requirements for the fiscal year 2008-09 Proposition Q program.
Okay, Ramon Soto with the CAO's office. I'm here on this item as well. The SB 165 report is for the Prop Q General Obligation Bond Program under the California Government Code Section 53411, which was enacted as part of the Local Agency Special Tax and Bond Accountability Act of 2000, which applies to any local bond measure placed on the ballot after January 1st, 2001. The Chief Fiscal Officer of the issuing agency is required to file an annual report with its governing body concerning the use of local bond measure proceeds. The legislation requires the annual report to include the amount of funds collected and expended, as well as the status of any project required or authorized to be funded, as identified in the statement regarding or indicating the specific purposes of the bond authorization. At this time, the SB 165 requirements apply only to the Proposition Q Citywide Public Safety General Obligation Bond, which was approved by the voters in 2002, and to the Proposition O Clean Water, Ocean, River, Beach, Bay Stormwater Cleanup GO Bond, which was approved by the voters in 2004. So the report before you, as I've indicated, applies only to the Prop Q program at this point. And the status is as follows. All $600 million in Prop Q GO bond funds were issued by 2006-07. The 2009 budget for Prop Q was $698.6 million, which reflects the original $600 million in bond authority, plus $73.6 million in accrued interest, $16.3 million in bond premiums, and $8.7 million in reimbursement from other funds. The $698.6 million was allocated as follows: the $52.2 million for land acquisition, $36.4 million for design, $513.8 million for construction, $10.5 million for other direct costs, $75.6 million for project management, construction management, city staff costs, and other items such as arbitrage, auditing, public art, and at the time, $10.1 million for contingency. All 11 originally authorized projects had been completed by 2009, and 4 new projects had been authorized by the council, which were the 2 I discussed earlier, the last item regarding the police academy, the Rampart Station renovation, and the Northeast Station renovation. The Controller's Office has prepared information, which is shown in Attachment A in our report, that indicates that for 2009, the total debt service payments for the 4 bond issuances was $51.22 million, and receipts were $49.81 million. And as much as the report is submitted for informational purposes only, it is recommended that it be noted and filed.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'd like to add to that, though, as well, to my colleagues, that it's been pretty remarkable under not only these bonds, but also Prop L, which was the library bond, that we built 2 additional libraries that were not part of the original bond, and 4 additional libraries that weren't part of the original bond. And what we've been able to do, and the city's been able to do, to bring projects on time and under budget, or ahead of time and under budget in many cases, in every one of these bonds in the last decade, has been remarkable. And I don't think there's any other city in the country that can point to that type of success record. So I just wanted to compliment you on that and pass this and move it on as well.
Thank you. And I would just like to note, as long as you're complimenting other programs, for Prop F, which is a fire and animal shelter program, we actually have sufficient savings to build 2 new fire stations. We're having Fire Station 7 was authorized by the council, as well as the new 39s. And so we're able to get 2 new fire facilities out of that as well. So we're very happy about that.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And we'll go ahead and note and file that. All approved. And the last item.
Item 12, Board of Police Commissioners report relative to a monetary donation in the amount of $16,000 for the purchase and installation of equipment and telecommunications infrastructure needed to support the Situation Room for use by the Police Department's Major Crimes Division.
Okay, and we've got some presenters from LAPD for that as well.
Peter DiCarlo from Administrative Services Bureau.
Lieutenant Mark Stainbrook from Major Crimes Division, Anti-Terrorism Intelligence Section.
Terrific. And I believe Mr. Zine has some questions on this item.
Lieutenant, the Situation Room, the only one to know about is CNNs. Can you describe what the Situation Room is?
Sure, sir. Major Crimes is made up of 166 people, 6 different sections ranging from organized crime to criminal conspiracy, our SARS unit, surveillance section, technical support unit, and anti-terrorism intelligence section. So we have a wide range of units that cover a lot of different activities, and as you can imagine, a massive amount of information comes in. And to date, in the new facility, we don't have any one place to take in all that information, turn it into usable intelligence, and have a place to analyze it and display it and act on it. Of course, we have units all over the city doing operations, counterterrorism operations, from surveillance to investigations, undercover work. And so it's also an issue of situational awareness and a single point in place where we can store and look at that information from a command perspective.
So you'll be able to punch up to see what's going on.
Essentially, it will also link us into the JRIC a little bit better and RACER, and we're looking at taking some applications like Palantir and putting them there, so we have a single point where investigators can come and have contact with those other entities regionally and in the city.
So it could be used on an everyday basis and not just...
Oh, we intend to use it on an everyday basis and have a daily battle rhythm and operational cycle for pulling in information, allowing the command staff to see from a counterterrorism perspective where we are and where our resources are at any one time.
Okay. And is that going to be sufficient to complete everything you need there, or do you need additional dollars?
That's a good question. I may have to look for additional funds. I'm working with Burst Communications. They've submitted a bid which is right now about $8,000 more than the grant I have, and that doesn't include some monitors and extra hardware and software. I think I'll be able to find those items or pull them down in their bid or look for other bids through the city or through other companies.
Okay. So this is housed in the new police administration building?
Yes, sir. It's to be on the 9th floor in the video teleconference room, which is set up well for what we would like to do. Large whiteboards, video teleconferencing capability. This is just additional capability to have those items up for situational awareness, potentially eventually getting camera feeds in there and things like that, although that would probably be somewhere down the road.
Okay. And this is presented from the Police Foundation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how do you express your appreciation to them?
Every day I take them out to lunch, I call them, and I ask for more money.
All right, with that,
I want to make sure
anything else, Mr. Zine?
They do a lot of funding for a lot of different programs.
They do. They've been good friends to the counterterrorism units, and done several grants through them. So we work together all the time, and definitely will be sending them some thank yous.
All right.
All right.
That was my only concern.
No problem. Well, I want to let you know that Mr. Zine is extremely philanthropic and donates a large portion of his own salary to many organizations and foundations throughout the city of Los Angeles. So, with that note, if you do fall short, excuse me, I got the. If you fall short in building this facility, you may want to contact Mr. Zine. Mr. Reyes?
We're going to make a note of that.
And take him to lunch.
With a lot of love notes. But I did want to ask, I know this is only $16,000. It's for this situation room. But we also heard today a whole range of actions for pretty large sums of monies that deal with terrorism, anti-terrorism. And I'm not sure this is the appropriate time to ask this, but when you look at international terrorism and national terrorism, then you have the neighborhood terrorism, gangs and the system and the networks with the prisons. Is there an overlay in terms of how we are managing this information? Are you also engaging that level of networking, or is it just so complicated that it's hard to even address?
No, I think we are managing that. For example, our organized crime folks work a lot on the gang issues, especially Armenian Power and other organized crime groups. So we do hit that daily neighborhood impact level as well. And sometimes we see cross-pollination from the international to the domestic level. Chief Downing recently testified before Congress concerning prison radicalization and essentially the Al-Qaeda effect on some of our prison population and what happens when they come out. So there is like that cross-pollination. But I think from the national level, we have someone stationed at the National Operations Center, a detective, down through the regional center at the JRIC, through our citywide ability at Racer. This is just one more component to help manage the massive amount of information that we get on a daily basis.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I believe that concludes our meeting of the Public Safety Committee. Oh, we approved it, I believe. We're approving it. Yes, and moving it on. All approved. Now that concludes our meeting of the Public Safety Committee. Thank you very much.